What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty P here with another episode on Steelers Touchdown Under. I'm going to get straight into it. This show all about changes, Mike Tomlin. Now, first things first, I'm not going to sit here and say, let's fire Mike Tomlin. I'm not going to sit here and say Mike Tomlin is the safest coach in the world. Now, personally, how I feel about Mike Tomlin, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, doesn't really matter. What matters is the way the Pittsburgh Steelers are performing right now. What matters is the fact that we've just come off a press conference. I've woken up to it. It's just gone 7 a.m. my time as I go to record this show. And I've heard the press conference of Mike Tomlin. I watched the thing in full. I could have done this show an hour ago. Instead, I watched it in full, looked at a couple of reactions to it for a bit of level setting. It was interesting, the Pat McAfee show there, 10-minute reaction to it. Tone Diggs, not a fan of it. It was interesting to hear, even Pat McAfee say a guy like Tomlin is his time in the NFL running out. I don't think it is. Let's just kick that off. I don't think a coach with a 63.4% winning record, a coach that's won 262 games in 17 years in the NFL, I think there's a bit more leeway with the Rooney family there, particularly when you think 3 coaches for Pittsburgh in over 60 years. But the hourglass for changes is definitely running out when it comes to the offense and the defense, and it's not about players. And I think if the Steelers go out and get belted this week, you're not going to be able to say, and it doesn't even need to be on the scoreboard, it's just in how the Ravens are going to play. There's not going to be any excuse of we need padded practice anymore. The excuse is that it's not going to suffice. What is going to need to happen is there's going to have to be a change. And what I find really frustrating, because I am a Mike Tomlin fan, is last week's pre-game press conference, or it was after post-game press conference, one of them that he did. I mean, it's all melding into one when it gets around a loss. He said, definition of idiocy is doing the same thing 3 times and expecting a different result. We lost 30-7 against the 49ers. We lost 30-6 against the Texans. If there's a similar scoreline on the weekend, that's 3 times. And the funny thing is, too, is I'm a Kenny fan. I want Kenny to play. I don't want him to play with a bone bruise and put the team behind. I also think take this week, get right fit for the bye. I actually think a little bit of time. I've got a unique perspective on this. I said this during Ben's injury in 2019 because I've seen it work in a lot of other sports. Sometimes when you're injured, the mental reps you get and the ability you get to sit back and actually have a look at what's happening on the field, where you're not always in that sort of playing, training, schedule, and what have you, can actually be really valuable because you can actually sit back and see stuff. This could be a really good week for Kenny to do that, to sit back and say, okay, how has this happened in game during the season versus preseason? It's the first time I've basically had out apart from the off season to actually see what's happening in season, find a few things, look at things from a bird's eye view, even from that perspective. So that's one thing. But if Kenny is out, then Mitch Trubisky plays. And if Canada does poorly, again, or the offense does poorly, let's say, again, we go back to the whole crux of the conversation that I think is tearing a lot of Steelers fans up right now, which is Canada is the common denominator between Ben's last year's poor performance, Trubisky's poor performance, and I said Ben, like he won us a lot of games down the stretch and finished with a positive record, but it was a much more of a struggle in the Canada offense to the point Ben was drawing up plays in the dirt. We all know that story. Then Trubisky sort of falters at the start of last season, bit of him, bit of Canada. Then Kenny Pickett comes in, and again, it's back to the Big Ben making fourth quarter comebacks and plays to win out games. That's not Matt Canada's stamp on the offense. And if that is Matt Canada's stamp on the offense, that's not good enough. You cannot have an offensive coordinator strategy in this league that is, we're going to do bare minimum up until games. We're going to start the games with sweeps and pointless runs that any man and his dog can predict on the sideline. And then hopefully we'll win it in the fourth quarter because we've got a good enough defense. That's not an NFL strategy. And if that's coming top down from Tomlin, then shame on Tomlin on that. But I don't think it is. He's too smart for that. He's too quality for that. But as the title of this show says, the hourglass on changes is running out for Tomlin. Steel fans, I mean, it will be a riot the next home game if they get belted against the Baltimore Ravens and beaten to a pulp. They go to the bye, they come back, and when we go away to LA, but as soon as we're back home, Steel fans, it will be a riot. It will not be. It'll either be a riot or there'll be no one there. And all the hype of the preseason, all the first round draft picks. I said this in my takeaway show. I said this in Mark and the show Mark and I did recently. You've got like over the last 3 years, 4 years, the investment, and yeah, Claypool didn't work, but the investment in their first and second and third picks in the draft on offense is huge, absolutely huge. And that the product that we see on the field looks like we've picked all those guys in the 7th round. And it's just not acceptable in an era of NFL football that is defined by offense, defined by names like Allen, defined by names like Patrick Mahomes, Rodgers before he got injured. He's had several years of 40 plus TDs. Josh Allen, there you go. I was having the blank. Even Lamar Jackson, what he can do. Joe Burrow is injured right now, but he can put up points. The Steelers are not going to win games with the offense only capable of scoring 15 points. At the moment, we've had two games where collectively we've scored only 13 points. It is not good enough. That's nothing new for anyone listening right now. But I think the timeline for change, or the hourglass for change, is definitely running out for Tomlin. And I hope the Steelers, obviously as a fan, can win this week. I don't see a path to victory right now from what I'm hearing about how many guys are injured, knowing what the offense is doing, knowing of how much it's going to rely on the defense, and knowing the Ravens defense as well. Like, you've got to be always hopeful of fans, but it's kind of expect the worst and hope for the best at this point. But my concern is going a little bit beyond this game, and it's for the rest of the season. What happens here? What happens after this? Because if there's not changes, how much worse is this going to get? I don't think that Mike Tomlin, even with a losing record, would be fired by Rooney. He's got the full year next year, and they've got a full year to do something else. A lot of people are furious about people like Eric Bieniemy. I don't think he would have been the right coordinator for Kenny Pickett. But people have talked about all the different guys that were available in the offseason. The Steelers didn't go and get. The other problem for Mike Tomlin is Teryl Austin, and I've been talking about this for almost 18 months now, that Teryl Austin gets a free pass because of Canada. That's got to be fixed as well. But when this defense is out there more than 50% of the time, or is being forced to make a play, or it's going to fail, you kind of also sit there and you're like, well, there's only so much they can do. So as I said, I don't think this is even just a Matt Canada thing. I think this is the hourglass for change is across the board. I don't know whether they've fully fixed the linebacker position. I said it to Mark in a message yesterday. I think Holcomb could be the best number 2 or a really good 1B in the league. I don't think he's a 1A linebacker. Quan is a great third. Orlando Robinson is a great third. They can both step up and be a 2 at times. They're not proper. They're not proper number 2 linebackers. The defensive line without Cam, they've obviously a drop in quality. There's obviously injuries. And drop of quality. But he's injured. There's a drop of experience again because he's injured. They've got a lot of young guys there. But Cam's 34. This is a problem that's only going to get worse. They've got to improve the quality, or they've got to improve the experience and the quality, bigger than guys that really are on practice squads. Fehoko would have struggled to make the Chargers roster. We all love him in Pittsburgh because we love nose tackles and hard defense, but he wasn't going to make that roster. That's the reality of it. He even said that in a press conference during the preseason when he got put to the practice squad. So there's a mountain of personnel things that we've got to fix. And yes, those injuries don't help Canada and Teryl Austin. But they've got to be better than that. Look at what Howe's doing with Washington right now. And they got a great defense, but they're doing a bare minimum on offense. They've got a good run game with Brian Robinson Jr. They've got Jahan Dotson. They've got Terry McLaurin. They've got some great guys out there, and they can make it work better than what the Steelers team is working at the moment, from a cohesion perspective and from an excitement perspective and from making plays and from looking like they're actually going to do something on the field. So if the Commanders can do it with Ron Rivera, who is a fairly good NFL coach, but nowhere near Mike Tomlin's class, and it's not just Eric Bieniemy. He's had Ron Rivera has had some decent seasons and done some decent things with that team since he joined there. They can still make the playoffs in that division at 7-9, back on 16 games. It's crazy. But the Steelers have a lot more pieces of the puzzle, And we see performances, 2 out of the 4 performances so far are 30-6 or 30-7 big losses that could have, frankly, could have been worse. I mean, CJ Stroud, he had 306 yards, he had the 2 TDs, number of first downs. But then I went back and looked at it, and he 15 from 30 passes. He barely 16, from 30 passes. He barely hit 50%. That defense should have feasted. The offense, if it would have performed, he would have been under more pressure. He probably would have had a negative in terms of pass completions versus passes thrown. But that doesn't happen because these defenses haven't endured. That doesn't happen because this defense isn't performing well enough either. This defense is. Imagine if you took. Let's keep TJ there, even though he's the best player on the field, defensive player in the league. Keep TJ there. If you took Highsmith and you took out Minka from this team, the losses would be much worse. And I don't think I don't think we would have won the Cleveland game. Obviously, with Highsmith and the forced fumble he caused, you can take that out. Plus all the other things that Minka does always against the Browns. And I don't think we would have run the Raiders game. So it'd be 0-4. At that point, would that have been enough to fire Canada and put Teryl Austin on the hot seat? These are some of the questions as a Steelers fan that you start to think about when you hear a press conference like today from Mike Tomlin. So when padded practice does or doesn't work this week, and the Steelers can win and it can still not have worked, I'm really interested to hear what the next thing is. Because the good news for you guys as Steelers fans, guys and gals out there, is there's only a certain number of things that can be labeled as an excuse and tried before Matt Canada's fired. And that number is shrinking. So let's just hope that the losses don't extend up as the excuses start shrinking. Let's hope we can get some wins, but it's kind of feels like a catch-22. If we win games and they're not going to make the change that they so desperately need to make this season worth something. Otherwise, we're wasting one of Cam's last years. We're wasting a year of Kenny Pickett's development. We're wasting prime TJ Watt. We're wasting prime Minka Fitzpatrick. What was the point in signing Alex Highsmith to a $70 million deal? You may as well have padded up the offensive line. You may as well have gone and got a top cornerback in the league. Wasting the last 2 years of Pat Peterson, who I don't think has performed nearly as well as I thought he might, but at the same time, you're still wasting him. He went out there to get a Super Bowl. Pat Freiermuth, they don't use him or they put him in a position to get injured. It's a waste. You feel like what's the point? But you know what? We will keep providing content for you. We will keep the faith and the ember of hope alive for this Steelers team. Let's hope Tomlin can make these changes. Let's hope the team can eke out a win against the Baltimore Ravens. Well, lots of content coming throughout the week. If you like the show, hit the like button. As always, if you are not a sub yet, this is the second, third, fourth video you've watched. Hope you like the content. Just hit the sub button. Then you get all of us, particularly all the notifications for our shows. You get the live stuff too. And yeah, as always, go Steelers.